This is Heather Scalf. Today is June 29th, 2015, and I'm interviewing Janet Abel, the daughter of William P. Rowe, for the first time. This interview is taking place at the University of Texas at Arlington's Central Library in Arlington, Texas. This interview is sponsored by the College of Liberal Arts and is part of the Maverick Veteran Voices Project. So, you were born the same year your father was commissioned.
I was.
So you had the lifetime experience of being in the military.
I did. I once saw a picture of my mom, very pregnant with me, pinning on my dad's little butter bars, his lieutenant bars. So I truly was born into the Army way of life.
So can you recall what your first impressions or your strongest impressions as a child were of growing up in the military?
My strongest impressions were that it seemed very normal to me to move. It's a lot of upheaval, but it seemed like a natural progression almost every year. I grew up in many different school systems in several different countries, and I realized early on that was going to be my way of life, that I had to accept it.
So as you look back on that as an adult, what are the things that you look at differently or realize differently now that you've grown?
I associate time with places where I've lived. Memories, if I'm thinking about a particular year, then the pictures that come into my mind are where I was living that year. So it's easy for me to remember my childhood in a sequence of where we lived. And that was in a lot of different places. I went to 12 different schools. I split my first grade year at two different places and my 12th grade year at two different places. And so the perspective I got was very much of a worldwide perspective, not just a localized upbringing.
Mm-hmm. So can you describe how your father's military service shaped your family?
I feel that it instilled a great deal of respect for our country and for our military in general. It was I have an endearing feeling towards the military and towards that way of life. I certainly can empathize with children in the military who have to frequently move and reorient themselves to new cultures, new places, new people. But also I find that the world isn't so big that you don't sometimes run into people in odd places that you've seen at prior duty stations. So it's very interesting that way. There's usually a little surprise here and there, or you'll run into somebody in an airport. As a matter of fact, I ran into my mother once. Unknowingly, at an airport. I had been living in Germany and she had been living in Taiwan, and for some reason we were both flying in the States and happened to pass each other in the airport, and I saw her and said, "Mom," and she surprisingly turned around. Of course, communication was much slower then. There weren't computers or email, and we really weren't on top of each other's travel plans at the time, but it was an interesting, probably my most interesting unexpected surprise on a trip.
Definitely. So you mentioned you were in Germany at the time. What were you doing in Germany?
Well, I grew up as an Army brat, and then my first marriage was with the Air Force. I was a dependent wife in the Air Force for 14 years, and at that time was young in my 20s and stationed over in West Berlin at the time.
Oh, okay. So traveling while your family was serving, what are some of your fondest memories of places that you went as a child?
I think I can easily pick my very favorite tour of duty as a child was West Point, New York. The safety and security of that post is phenomenal. The college university atmosphere was a really healthy incentive, made me want to continue on in my schooling when I was older and go to college and get a degree. Traditions were really formed in West Point. And as a child, it was a very freeing experience because I could go all over the fort, all over the post, and freely. As a 10 to 13-year-old stationed there at the time, it was a wonderful experience. riding my bike on the trails of Stony Lonesome, down to Mikey Stadium, going to the football games, sitting in the peanut gallery, and cheering on, Army. And just really, we sponsored a cadet there. So we would have the cadet over for holiday meals. And that was a very nice experience, because I think it gave that cadet a taste of family, and it gave us a future perspective of college life. So I was really thrilled with that. And my current husband's oldest son attended West Point. And it was nice to have that in common, that we could talk about those similarities. And he has served in the Army as a physician, as an orthopedic doctor. So the tradition carries on in the family in one way or another.
When did he graduate?
It was June of '98.
Okay. Do you recall any events in your father's career that you look back now and realize that's significant for him? Not just for the family, but something that you thought was a significant thing for him?
I think about the significance of his tour of duty in Seoul, South Korea, at Yangsan Army Post. He was with the J2 TNT, which is a tunnel neutralization team. And during his tour of duty there, they found a significant tunnel that the North had built into the South. And I was really, as an older teenager, I was about 16 or 17 at the time, I was really impressed by that. That put into perspective his civil engineering background along with his intelligence background. And I thought that came together very nicely. I was so proud of his commanding abilities at West Point. A few times would walk down from Stony Lonesome to his job at the bottom of the hill and go to the 528th Engineering Command. And that's one thing you learn growing up, is a lot of the titles of the units. You get to know that military jargon, that language pretty readily. I still know his social security number. And it's ingrained. It's something that's really ingrained. I remember preparing for our trip, our family tour to Seoul, South Korea, getting all of the different inoculations you have to get, which sometimes take a toll physically, getting 6 or 8 shots to prepare for those exotic possibilities, and getting dog tags for myself. It really made me feel as part of the military family, and as an important part of the family. I know a lot of people said if the military wanted you to have a family, they would have issued you one at the time. Now things are a lot different. But I always felt he incorporated us into his military life. He took us to his jobs. He introduced us to his coworkers. He sometimes hosted unit parties at the house. And it was exciting helping my mom prepare for those parties, which weren't every day. It was a once a year maybe activity, but it was very exciting to see that part of his life. And he carried himself at home as he did at work in a very level-headed, straightforward, no-nonsense, highest level of integrity kind of person that you could meet. So I'm very proud of that. I'm proud that that's my heritage, and that's what I've gained from him.
It's a great heritage. So his transition from military to civilian life, you were grown.
Right.
So do you have any thoughts or ideas about that?
I was, on a selfish level, going backwards a little bit. When I was about 7 years old, he was in Vietnam, and we were eligible for an R&R in Hawaii, and took a trip over in the middle. I think it was wintertime when we went to Hawaii, so it was very nice and warm, tropical. And I begged every assignment, please let's go to Hawaii, please let's go to Hawaii. And he waited until I was fully grown. That was his last military assignment. So selfishly, I was a little annoyed at that. I did not get to go because we were so far away to his military retirement. I would have given anything to go back and go to that, because I think it was such a proud moment. But he trooped right through it. It's a big transition to go from a military way of life to not having an active military way of life. And he went right on through, picked up his work in Taiwan with the State Department. I was very proud about that. Very proud of my mom for her contributions. And he kept on rolling. He worked until he was done working, retired, and then enjoyed his time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he looked back and regretted anything. I think he fulfilled a lot of the dreams and desires that he had. And he had a lot more to do as well. But I think
Mm-hmm.
he was needed. God needed him at the time he took him.
So, did your military experience growing up as a dependent daughter influence your views on today's military and things that are going on now? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. For those soldiers, airmen, and sailors that are serving overseas, whether they're deployed in a combat zone or deployed in a hot zone or dangerous, it's all dangerous. I'm so proud of their service, and I really, every day, I'm thankful for the way of life that they've enabled us to have, because having lived in Seoul, South Korea, outside of the Army post, we lived on the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And I had firsthand experience of the freedoms and rights that we don't get to enjoy in Korea that are protected in the United States. Any other country in the world, we wouldn't get the rights. Even westernized countries in Europe, you don't have the same rights that the military has fought for us and preserved for us and protected in the future for us here in our country. So even though there were times when I was an expatriate living overseas with the military, I always felt so grateful to have that experience, but even more grateful to get home to the United States of America. It's truly the best place on the planet to be.
So, is there anything you'd like to contribute that I didn't ask?
About my dad, my fondest memories were playful memories. When I was 3 years old in Kaiserslautern, Germany, he and my brother were shaking a pine tree where I was standing, and all the snow fell on me. They ran out, and it was quite funny. I remember that. I remember taking a cruise ship back from Germany. It was a troop ship, but it was part of the Cunard Line, which is a famous English or European cruise line. And we helped out some friends and brought their big Dalmatian dog back, and there are memories from that, being only 3.5 years old. I have going in downtown Seoul and exploring places and fishing at West Point. He taught me how to thread a worm on the hook, and there's a lot of basics that he taught me that will live with me forever, and that I apply in life with my children and myself. But I'm just very proud of his service and his accomplishments. And he didn't brag about those things. He was very humble and very, very well read, very intelligent, very smart man, but also very humble. And I just appreciate the life that he gave me with the worldwide perspective that I gained from the military experience as a dependent child. That's about it. So.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure talking with you today, and I appreciate your spending the time. I appreciate your service. I know growing up as a dependent is not always easy. There are rewards, but there are also difficulties as well. And I appreciate your support of your father's service and your support of this project.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.